Okay, good morning. Welcome to our session on student funding. My name is Rob Fowler. I manage the Student Money Advice and Rights team at the University of Derby. Just before we start, a couple of things to make you aware of. This session or this event is being recorded live. There is a live Q&A function running throughout, so please submit any questions that you like in the chat box. We'll answer as many as we can at the end of the presentation. If you can see a question that you would like to ask that's already been asked, then please like it so that we can prioritise the most popular questions. Today I've got Emma and Heather with me, who will be reading out the questions once I've finished the presentation. Okay, so you've got two main costs each year whilst you're at university. There's the tuition fees and the living costs. Tuition fees, that's the amount of money that you need to pay to the university to be on the course that you're studying. Living costs covers essentially everything else. So from accommodation and your bills, food, travel, clothes, books, pens and paper, everything that you need to pay for whilst you're a student comes under the headline of living costs. There are several elements of funding available to pay for all of these things. There is a tuition fee loan. There's a maintenance loan, which is the living cost loan. There are grants for dependents. There's additional funding from September 2020 for healthcare courses and also university bursaries, and we'll have a look at those in turn as we go through the presentation. So first of all, payment of the tuition fee. All students can apply for a tuition fee loan each academic year for a maximum of £9,250, which is the maximum amount of the tuition fee. If you take out this loan, then you won't need to pay your course fees up front. They'll be paid direct to the university by the student loans company. It's not income assessed, so it doesn't matter what the household income is. There's no income assessment when it comes to the tuition fee loan. Bear in mind, if you don't take out the tuition fee loan, then you will need to pay your fees upfront on an annual basis. But if you are taking out the tuition fee loan, then there's nothing to pay upfront, and your fees will be paid direct to the university at the point of enrolment. The maintenance loan is the living cost loan, so that's the amount of money that is paid to the students in 3 instalments over the year to pay for rent and living costs and everything else. Two main bands that we'll look at, a maximum of £9,203 a year for students living away from the parental home and studying outside central London, and a maximum of £7,747 a year for students who are living at home and commuting to university. These figures will be slightly higher if you're on a healthcare course, so nursing, occupational therapy, diagnostic radiography as examples, just due to the nature of the courses and the length of those academic years. So they will be assessed accordingly. But the two main bands are the two bands that we're looking at there. Now, if we break them down a little bit, the tuition fee loan, as we established early on, is non-means tested, but the maintenance loan is assessed based on an assessment of household income. So if we look at the current slide, the left-hand column, maximum available, that's the 9203 and the 7747. The middle column is the amount that doesn't depend on household income. So that is the first non-means tested amount. So all students, regardless of household income, can receive at least the amount in the middle column. So the 4289 and the 3410. The right-hand column, that is the amount that is assessed based on household income. So the amount that isn't assessed and the amount that is assessed equals the total. So that's how the maintenance loan is broken down. If you want to get a very clear idea of what your student funding will look like if you haven't already applied and if you haven't already received notification, you can go onto the student finance calculator on gov.uk. So gov.uk, education and learning, student finance, and then the student finance calculator. It has 5 questions in total, including which academic year, where you're going to be living, what your household income is as examples, and it will tell you very clearly what your student funding will look like. It's a very simple calculation because it is essentially a very simple calculation. It just looks at when you're studying, where you're going to be living, and what your household income is, and based on that information it will tell you what your maintenance loan will be. Tuition fee loan will always be 9250 because the fees are always 9250, but have a look at that if you've not had a look already. The student finance calculator on gov.uk, very useful tool, very simple to use. Other financial support available for students are the grants for dependents. So if a student has a dependent child or children, or has an adult who is financially dependent on them as the students, then you can be assessed for grants for dependents. So there's a parental learning allowance if you have a child or children. There is a childcare grant that pays up to 85% of any childcare costs, and an adult dependence grant if you as a student have an adult who is financially dependent on you. All of these things are assessed automatically. There's no separate application. You don't have to look for these as part of your application. If, as you go through the application, you ask questions, do you have any children? Do you have any dependent adults? If you answer yes to either of those, it will automatically take you through the assessment for these grants. So if you're eligible, then you're eligible and you will receive them. They are non-repayable because they're allowances and grants, so they're not loans. You don't pay them back. However, they are means tested. They are assessed on your income, as a student. So they are assessed on the household income. Now, when it comes to assessment of student funding, it's important to understand how that works. In the first instance, as a default setting, the student finance, the student loans company, are looking for students under the age of 25. So if you're under the age of 25, they're looking for parental household income. That's the automatic setting. If parents are separated or divorced, it's the natural parent that you normally live with. If that parent is remarried or is living with a partner, so a step parent, for example, then it's their income as well. So it's the household income, so the income of the parental household that the student is living in. So if a student is under 25 years of age, that's what they're looking for. Now, there are exceptions, obviously. If a student is married, regardless of age, then it will be assessed. The student funding will be assessed on the student's partner, so the income of the student's partner. So if a student is 20 but married, then parents' income doesn't come into it, it's partner's income. If a student qualifies for independent status, again, regardless of age, they will also be assessed on their own circumstances and not parental household income. So as examples, if a student is over 25, obviously they're over the minimum age limit, so over 25, they're assessed on their own circumstances, not parents. If a student, regardless of age, can demonstrate that they've been financially independent, so financially self-supporting for 3 years prior to the start of the course, they can be assessed as independent. Again, regardless of age, if a student has a child, automatically independent. If a student is estranged from their parents, then again, they will be classed as independent and assessed on their own income. It's not always clear cut as to what these criteria are, as to where a student fits into some of these. So it may be a conversation that you will need to have with student finance, either pre-entry, or you can have that conversation post-entry once you've arrived. Come and see my team at the university, or someone like us, and we can have a chat with you and liaise with student finance if that's necessary. But they're the general criteria. Okay, so payment of loans. Once you've been assessed, your loans are paid in 3 instalments through the academic year. So for September starters, the first instalment is paid in September, 3 to 5 days after enrolment. Second instalment in January, normally between the 2nd and the 4th of January, and the last instalment is in April. The last couple of years, it's been around between the 10th and the 20th of April. Now, you will receive a payment schedule once your student funding has been approved, that will tell you exactly what you're getting and when you're getting it. So there won't be any surprises when it comes to receipt of your student funding. You will know in advance what you're getting and when you're getting it. And again, just to say, and we'll move on to repayments next, that no loans are repayable until after the course is completed. So whilst you're studying, there'll be no repayments going on. It's only after you've completed study. So for repayments, everything that you borrow from the student loans company, so tuition fee loan and maintenance loan, is put together into one amount that is repayable to the government over the terms of the repayment. So you don't pay an amount for your tuition fee loan and pay an amount for your maintenance loan. It's a single payment for all of the loans that you've taken out. The current threshold for repayments to start is £26,575 a year. So under that amount, which is gross income, you're paying nothing back. Balances are written off after 30 years. So the repayments are made over a maximum period of 30 years. That's 30 years from when you complete study, not 30 years from when you start making repayments. So it's a set period of 30 years. So if we look at the repayments currently then based on the threshold, so if you're earning up to 26,575, then your monthly repayment is 0. So you're paying nothing back to the government for whatever amount you've borrowed from them. You may have borrowed 10,000, you may have borrowed 60,000. It doesn't matter what you borrowed. These are the repayments for the total. If you're earning £30,000, then you're paying 9% of your income over the threshold of 26,575. So if you're earning £30,000 a year, you're paying £25 a month back to the student loans company. If you're earning £40,000 a year, you're paying £100 a month back. So it's always 9% of your income over the threshold of 26,575. So that's what your repayments are. The government are very clear, and we're also very clear that not all students will pay back all of the loans that they've taken out. Some students will pay none of their loans back. Some students will pay all of their loans back, but most students will pay some of their loans back. Again, there are repayment calculators available online. If you go and do an internet search on any of the keywords, so student funding, repayment calculator, it will take you there, and it will give you a very good idea based on your, on where you're going and where you see your career, as to what your repayments may look like. But just as a general rule and as a general guide, just for you today, 9% of your income over the threshold is what you pay back per month, and it's done automatically as stoppages through your wages. So you'll pay national insurance, income tax, and student loan. The only exception to that is if you are self-employed or you're working overseas, in which case you'll just need to contact Student Finance and have a conversation with them to set up a manual payment. And although it's a manual payment, it will still be the same threshold and the same repayment amounts, but they just can't take it as stoppages as normal. Now, just going again onto some additional funding. So from September 2020, the government are reintroducing some support for nursing and allied healthcare students. So they're introducing a non-repayable grant of at least £5,000 a year to help with living costs. This can increase to £8,000 a year depending on the course that you're studying and eligibility on that course. But the basic amount that's been announced for all eligible students is at least £5,000 a year. So all students will get the £5,000 a year. It's a separate application to your student funding. You apply through the NHS Business Services Authority. If you've not seen it, or you've not been notified or sent any links to it, or you've not looked already, if you go onto the NHS website, which is the nhsbsa.nhs.uk, and then from there, student services, and then NHS Learning Support Fund, that's all of the information about the healthcare grant. Again, if you can't navigate directly like that, any kind of internet search on student funding, for healthcare students, nursing funding, it will take you there. But that is where the information lives. Provisional open date is the 1st of July, which is tomorrow. So you should be able to apply for that funding from the 1st of July, so from tomorrow. So keep your eyes out for that if it's something that you're going to be eligible for, and just have a look at it. But it's a separate application, so you will need to apply for this separately to your application to Student Finance. Again, looking at additional student funding, all universities have some kind of bursary, scholarship, additional money that they will look to give to students to support them whilst they're studying at that institution. So here at Derby, we have three main bursaries. We have the university bursary, we have the academic achievement scholarship, and we have the Buxton and Leek College bursary. Now, the main university bursary, which is the means tested bursary, is what we call the university bursary. It's assessed based entirely on household income, up to a maximum of £1,000 per year, so per academic year progressed, so stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. It's assessed automatically, as all of the university's bursaries are here at Derby. You apply for your student funding through Student Finance. They then notify the university of your basic information, including your household income, and we assess you for a bursary on that basis. So it's done automatically once you've enrolled. Notifications of bursaries normally go out towards the middle or the end of October, and the first payment of bursaries isn't until around the end of November. So there's plenty of time for bursaries to be assessed. So don't worry if you don't hear something immediately after enrolment. It could take up to the middle or the end of October to be notified, but If you want to have a look at eligibility, have a look on the university website, just do a search on the word bursary and it will take you to our bursary pages. Other bursaries, so we've got the Academic Achievement Scholarship, which is £1,000 in your first year only, which is a bursary to recognise academic success, as you arrive at the university. And then the Buxton Elite College bursary, again £1,000 a year in your first year, which is to encourage students to progress to full-time undergraduate study at the University of Derby from Buxton and Elite College. Only one of these can be awarded, so it may be that we'll get students coming to us from Buxton and Elite College who also have done very well academically, so on paper we'll be eligible for both. You can only receive one, so it's one of those, but you can receive these in addition to the first university bursary. But again, have a look at the bursary pages if you want some more information. And when you're looking for information, there's a few places you can look. The best place normally is on an individual university website. So go onto the derby.ac.uk. Again, if you search on the word bursary, if you search on the word funding, anything like that, it will take you to the information that you need. Gov.uk is a very, very good source of information. That's where the student funding calculator lives. That's where the student's funding application lives. For individual, so for Student Finance England, Wales, Northern Ireland, Scotland, they've got their own individual pages. So Student Finance England, for example, they live on a site called the Student Room, and then Student Finance Wales, Student Finance Northern Ireland and Scotland, and they have their own sites as well. So you can find those quite easily with a very basic search online. But excellent sources of information. There's a lot of information out there online. Okay, essential tips. We would always say apply for your student funding as soon as possible. So if you've not applied yet, then you need to be applying now, really. The funding application opened in February, so February 2020. The funding application always opens in the February before the September start. So the funding application is now live. The first deadline that Student Finance will always give is the end of May for funding applications. Now, the deadline of the end of May, all that does, that just guarantees that your student funding will be in place for September. The absolute deadline for student funding for an academic year is 9 months after the start of the course. So you could enrol in September and you could wait until May 2021 to apply for your student funding, and you could still apply. It does mean that you won't have any funding in place, obviously, for that whole academic year. But if you've not applied yet, apply now. If you don't know exactly what you're going to be doing in September, so if you haven't finalised the university, if you haven't finalised the course, it doesn't matter. You can still apply for your student funding. Student funding is the same nationally. It doesn't matter where you go, what you study, the fees are the same. So the student funding is the same. So apply on your best guess. If you think you're going to a particular university to do a particular course, apply for your student funding on that basis. If during the summer after clearing that changes, then you just go back onto your online account, change the institution, change the course, and that will just update your student funding, overnight. Don't wait until August to apply for your student funding, because it can take 12, 16, 20 weeks for student funding to come through. So apply early is probably the key message to take away, always. Once you've applied, and even if you haven't applied, because the student funding calculator is available, it's always good to sit down and work out a budget plan before you start university, just to give yourself an idea of what you've got coming in and what you've got going out. It doesn't have to be a very complex calculation or a very complex budget. Just 2 columns, left-hand column, just write down what you've got coming in, right-hand column, just write down your outgoings and just see what that looks like. It's a very personal thing when it comes to budgeting, and you yourself will know what your expenditure will look like, and you can compare that to your income. Open a student bank account. It's not essential. The student loans company will pay your funding into any account that's in your name, but certainly with a student bank account, the bank may offer you some additional benefits to having that account, not least an agreed overdraft, just to help as a budgeting tool and as a safety net for while you're studying. Again, after doing a budget, you can decide whether you need to supplement your income with part-time work or work during the holidays. There's always lots of opportunities to work whilst you're at university, either within the university, so on-campus work, or in the local area. So have a look at that and see if you need to supplement your income and how you can do that. And always at the end of the day, we will always say as a final message, don't panic. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of information about funding and about university life, and it can be a very challenging time for students coming to university. It can be an equally challenging time for parents having their children come into university. Don't be overwhelmed by it all. Don't be overwhelmed by the process, by the application process. It's a very simple application. It's essentially a series of questions. So keep going through the questions. Start with the first question, end with the last question, and that's often the best way to address it. So don't be overwhelmed. Is probably it's probably another key message when it comes to student funding. And if you've got any concerns about your funding pre-entry or once you're at university, then there are teams similar to mine, and certainly my team at the University of Derby, that you can contact pre-entry, or you can come and see us once you've enrolled if you've got any concerns with your student funding. If you think you've applied for the correct amount, if you think you haven't been assessed correctly, if there's anything you're not sure about, then just come and talk to us at the university. We're always available to speak to you. Okay, thanks for listening to that. That's the main presentation. I think I'm going to pass over to Heather or Emma, who may be able to ask some questions on your behalf to me.
Hi, yeah, thank you very much for that, Rob. So we have had quite a few questions that have come through, so we're going to go through some of the most popular ones of those now. So the first one that came through quite early was a really simple question of, can everyone receive funding?
Can everyone receive funding? Yeah, there's a few caveats to that. If it's your first time entering higher education, absolutely the funding is in place, so long as you're eligible under the normal terms of residency, and there's an age restriction. You need to be under 60 years of age to be eligible for the main package of student funding. If you've had previous study, then any previous study is taken off any future eligibility. But as a general rule, if it's your first time entering higher education, then yes, everybody can apply for student funding.
Okay, great, thank you very much. The second question that's come through in a few different ways by a few different people is a question around, do you have to wait until you have an unconditional firm offer or have your results before you apply for funding? Okay,
no is the very definite answer to that one. Like I said towards the end of the presentation, student funding is the same nationally. It doesn't matter where you go or what you're doing. When you apply for your student funding, all the student loans company need to know at the point of application is they need a university and a course. That's it. So apply on your best guess, and that's how they will assess your student funding. And like I say, if your course and the university changes before enrolment, then you just need to go online and change the university and or the course. The only important thing is at the point of enrolment. So when you go to university in September and you sit down and you confirm enrolment, the university that you enroll at and the course that you enroll on needs to be the same as the information that you've told the student loans company or Student Finance England or the equivalent student finance company. If you enroll at the University of Derby on a BA in English, then that's the course that needs to have been given to the student loans company for their information to link up. If they're expecting an enrolment message from a different university, then they won't release the funding. So yeah, you don't have to have a confirmed place, absolutely not. You can apply now just based on what you think you're going to be doing, and then any changes you can update during the summer.
Brilliant, thanks very much. So the next question that we've had through is about whether the Allied Health Professions bursary is means tested or not. Okay.
There's no information on the information about the new grants that there is any means testing. The guidance itself says that all students will receive at least £5,000. So there's no information that I've read, no guidance that I've read, no information that I've seen to suggest that it is means tested. All of the guidance is very clear, and it clearly states that all students will receive at least £5,000. So on that basis, I would say a very considered and definite no, it's not means tested.
Brilliant. So just one about how you get your loan through. So the question is about, do the savings that you have, your bank savings, affect the amount that you may receive as a loan?
No. The only thing that your student loan is assessed on is household income. So parental household income if you're a dependent student, or your own income, or partner's income if you're an independent student. No, important to say, certainly when we're talking about savings or anything like that, is that the student's income, anything that the student has, is never assessed. As a full-time undergraduate student, your income is always assessed as zero. It doesn't matter what you've been earning prior to enrolment or prior to coming to university. You can still be working part-time, you can still be working full-time as a student, but your income is never taken into account. It's only ever parental income or partner's income.
I think that's really helpful, because another question we did have through was about whether the individual student's income from a part-time job would go into that assessment. But
never. Students' income is never assessed. Never assessed.
Okay, great. The next question is for students who are looking to start in September 2021. When would you encourage them to start to apply for funding?
Okay, so the student funding application always opens in the February before the September starts. So if a student is starting in September 2021, then the application process will open in February 2021. And going back to what we've said before about applying early and that you don't need to have a confirmed place, as soon as the application opens, if the application opens, on a particular date in February 2021, then on that date you can apply for your student funding. So, and again, always apply early. If you can apply before May, then they guarantee your funding's in place for September. So, if you can apply, if it opens in February, you can, March, April, May, you've got plenty of time, 3 or 4 months to get an application in. So yeah, February 2021 would be an opening date for the funding application for September 2021 start.
Brilliant, thank you. And we've had another question come through that says, I'm the oldest of 6 children. Is parental income affected by the number of dependent children the parents are looking after?
Yeah.
Will that affect how much they might receive in a maintenance loan?
Absolutely, there is. When Student Finance are assessing household income, they apply certain disregards for certain criteria. And normally the disregards are based on the number of other dependent children in the household is the main one, and then there's also other disregards for contributions to private pensions. But certainly for other dependent children in the household, it was, figure wise, it always used to be, and this is up to about a year ago when I've last seen this figure, so I'm assuming it's still about the same. It was £1,025 deducted off gross income per child. So for example, if there are 5 other dependent children in the household, then £5,125 will be deducted off the gross income. So that's the immediate disregard for any other dependent children in the household. Similarly, if there is more than one child in higher education at the same time, then there are additional disregards if there's more than one child at university at the same time. But the basic disregard just applies to other dependent children in the household. So yes, that will reduce the income and therefore increase any eligibility for maintenance loan.
Great. So I think the final question we'll have time for is a question about what kind of bursaries and funding did disabled people get?
Okay. Any disability doesn't affect any of the basic funding or eligibility for student funding or university bursaries. Students can apply for DSA, Disabled Students Allowance, as part of their student funding application. So they'll be asked questions about any specific need that they have or any disability that they want to declare, and they will automatically go through an assessment process for Disabled Students Allowance. Now that normally provides additional support, either physical support or technological or just one-to-one support or other support for that student whilst at university. So there is support available, and it will be assessed automatically as part of the normal application if a student declares a disability on their application.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for answering all the questions, and thank you everybody for asking lots of questions. I think that's about all we've got time for, but thank you very much for joining us today. If you do have any further questions or your question wasn't answered, do have a look on our website that has lots of information about fees and funding, or do feel free to drop us a message at opendays@derby.ac.uk. Thanks again for joining us, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you.